In a small American town, a woman walks quietly, unseen. Mocked, doubted, dismissed as weak, yet carrying scars only warriors know. They said no one could make the shot. They laughed when she stayed silent. But when the world needed her most, she lifted her rifle and changed everything. Asterisk, if you enjoy stories of courage, sacrifice, and justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you never miss the next story. Now, let's begin the story of Claire Donovan, the woman who took the shot no one else believed possible. The town of Willow Creek looked like many others scattered across the Midwest. Small grocery stores lined Main Street. A single diner served hot coffee from sunrise to midnight, and people still waved when they passed each other in trucks. For outsiders, life here seemed quiet, maybe even uneventful. But beneath the surface, there were stories of people who had fought, bled, and given more than anyone could see. One of those people was Claire Donovan. Claire wasn't the kind of woman most folks in Willow Creek paid much attention to. She lived in a small brick house on the edge of town, with a yard that looked more like a training ground than a garden. Every morning before sunrise, she ran the old farm roads, her breath clouding the cold air, her boots pounding the gravel. By the time most people were just turning on their coffee pots, Claire had already finished miles of running, an hour of weights, and target practice with her old hunting rifle. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman who simply liked to keep fit. But the truth was more complicated. Claire had once served her country as a Navy SEAL. Most people didn't even know that was possible. The teams were almost all men, and though she had never liked the attention, her quiet success had made waves inside the military community. She had gone through the training, the grueling tests, the pain, and the doubt. She had made it, but in the eyes of many men she served with, she had never been truly accepted. That wound stayed with her. Back in Willow Creek, she tried to live quietly, keeping to herself. She trained not for attention, not even for pride, but because it was the only way she knew how to live. And maybe, just maybe, because deep down, she hoped for the day when her skills would mean something again. That day came sooner than anyone expected. It started at the local Veterans Hall, where the old brick building smelled of coffee, dust, and memories. Every Thursday night, men and women from different wars gathered there to share stories. Claire had been going for years, but mostly stayed in the back, listening more than speaking. One evening, Commander Ray Harlow, a retired SEAL who had served for decades, stood at the front. He was respected, even admired, though his words often carried a weight of arrogance. He had heard about Claire's time in the teams, but he never quite believed in it. "Let me tell you something," Harlow said, his voice loud and certain. "There are shots that no man or woman can make. I've seen snipers trained for years miss at distances you wouldn't believe. There's a reason men take those jobs. They're built for it. No offense to anyone here." His eyes landed on Claire when he said it. A few men chuckled. Some looked down, uncomfortable. Claire sat still, her jaw tight, but she didn't speak. She had heard worse during her service. Harlow grinned, sipping his beer. "I remember in Afghanistan, some hotshot swore up and down she could make an impossible shot. You know what happened?" She froze. Nerves got her. "It's not personal. It's just the way things are. Men handle pressure different." The chuckles turned into louder laughter now. Claire felt the heat rising in her chest, but still, she said nothing. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence spoke louder than anger. But then, one of the younger veterans spoke up. "What about you, Claire? You ever freeze under pressure?" The hall grew quiet. All eyes turned toward her. She set her glass down gently, her hand steady. "No," she said softly. The room waited for more. Claire's voice was calm, even but every word carried weight. I never froze. Not once. Not when I was under fire. Not when the team was counting on me. Not when lives were on the line. Harlow laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. That so? Then tell me, Donovan, you think you could make that shot? A mile out, wind cutting, 3 targets moving. I say no one can make it. Not you, not me, not anyone. Claire looked him in the eye. If the shot needs to be made, she said, I'll make it. The room was silent. Some smirked. Some raised their brows. But no one laughed this time. What no one in that hall knew was that fate was already working. Behind the scenes, far away from Willow Creek, enemies were moving. Plots were unfolding. It would soon shake not just Claire's quiet tone, but the whole country dot. And when the time came, the impossible shot Harlow had mocked her for would decide everything. That night, Claire walked home under the dim glow of the streetlights. Her boots crunched against the gravel road, her breath steady in the cool air. She felt the sting of the laughter still in her chest. But more than that, she felt something stirring deep inside. It wasn't anger. It was a reminder. She hadn't gone through all that pain and sacrifice for nothing. She hadn't trained her mind and body to be ignored. And when the time came, because she knew it always did, she would be ready. But for now, all she could do was wait, and train because the shot no one believed possible was coming. And Claire Donovan was the only one who could make it. The next morning in Willow Creek started like most others. The diner opened its doors early, the smell of bacon and coffee drifting down Main Street. Farmers parked their trucks outside the feed store, swapping news about weather and crops. Life carried on quietly, the way small towns do. But Claire Donovan's day began, as always, with discipline. She laced her boots before dawn and ran the empty roads, the horizon glowing with the first touch of daylight. Every stride steadied her mind. Every breath reminded her that she was alive and ready. When she returned home, sweat glistening on her forehead, she set her rifle on the wooden bench in her yard and began her practice. Claire's backyard wasn't much, just grass, gravel, and a few makeshift targets she had built herself. She lined up a row of glass bottles and cans, then took her stance. The rifle was an old hunting model, nothing fancy, but her grip on it was steady. She pulled the trigger, and each bottle shattered. In perfect rhythm, neighbors sometimes peeked out their windows, shaking their heads. To them, Claire looked like a woman stuck in the past, unable to move on from her time in the military. Some even whispered that maybe she wasn't right in the head. But Claire ignored them. She wasn't training for them. She was training for herself. That same morning, hundreds of miles away, 3 men in dark uniforms met inside a heavily guarded compound. They weren't from Willow Creek, or even from the United States. They were enemy generals' hard men, who had risen through the ranks with cruelty and fear. They spoke in low voices, their words hidden from the world, but their intent was clear. They were planning something brutal, something meant to send a message. And if their plan succeeded, thousands of innocent lives would be lost. But there was a weakness in their plan. A meeting was scheduled, a gathering of the 3 generals in a place far from their usual protection. It was a rare chance, one chance to stop them. The mission would require a sniper. Not just any sniper, but someone who could make a shot most believed impossible. That afternoon, back at the Veterans Hall, Commander Harlow sat at the bar, nursing a drink, when a man in a dark suit walked in. He wasn't a regular. His posture was sharp, his eyes alert. "Commander Harlow," the man said. Harlow frowned. "Do I know you?" "No," the man replied. "But I know you. And I know you keep company with a woman named Claire Donovan." Harlow laughed under his breath. "Donovan? You mean the one who thinks she belongs in the teams?" "What about her?" The man leaned closer. We need her. There's an operation coming. High priority, high risk. And from what I've been told, she may be the only one capable of pulling it off. Harlow nearly choked on his drink. You? Can't be serious. Out of every man in uniform, you want her? Look, I don't care what stories you've heard. She doesn't belong in that kind of fight. She crack. The man didn't flinch. Do you want thousands of lives lost, Commander? Harlow fell silent. The man stood straighter. We need Claire Donovan, whether you believe in her or not. And with that, he left. When Claire heard the knock at her door that evening, she expected it to be a neighbor or maybe a kid selling fundraisers for the school. Instead, she found the man in the suit standing on her porch. Miss Donovan, he said calmly, my name is Agent Brooks. I'm with a government task force. We have intelligence of an enemy plot. I'll be direct with you. We need your help. Claire studied him, her arms crossed. Why me? Because this mission requires the impossible, Brooks said. And from what I've read, you don't understand the word impossible. Claire's eyes narrowed. She had walked away from that life for a reason. She had given enough. But something in Brooks' voice carried weight. What kind of mission? She asked quietly. Brooks glanced around, then leaned closer. 3 enemy generals will be meeting soon. If they walk out alive, thousands of innocent Americans will die. We need someone who can stop them. Clean, fast, no mistakes. Can you do it? Claire didn't answer right away. Her mind flashed with memories, dusty roads overseas, gunfire echoing through canyons, teammates shouting her name. She thought of the faces of men who had told her she didn't belong, who had laughed when she proved them wrong. She thought of Harlow's words at the hall just last night. No one can make that shot. Her jaw tightened. Yes, she said finally, I can do it. The next week was a blur of preparation. Claire was flown to a secluded military base tucked away in the desert. There, she was given access to weapons and tools far more advanced than her hunting rifle. But more than that, she was given responsibility, the weight of lives depending on her. Some of the men on the base recognized her name. They whispered, they doubted. One even laughed openly when he heard she was the chosen sniper. You're kidding, right? He said to Brooks, out of everyone you could pick, you brought her? She won't pull it off. Women don't last in pressure like this. Claire heard him, but she didn't respond. She simply kept training, her focus sharper than steel. Day after day, she lay prone in the desert sand, adjusting for wind, distance, and movement. Her shots hit targets farther out than most of the men could manage. But still, the doubt lingered around her like a shadow. Brooks noticed it too. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, he approached her. They don't see it yet, he said, but I do. You're the one who can make this happen. Don't let their voices get inside your head. Claire looked at him, her face calm but her eyes steady. Their voices don't matter. The only thing that matters is making the shot. And deep inside, she knew she would dot as the day of the mission drew closer. Word spread quietly across the base. The generals were ruthless men. Taking them out in one operation could save countless lives, but only if it was done perfectly. Failure wasn't an option, and Claire Donovan mocked, doubted, underestimated, was the only one standing between success and disaster. The night before the mission, the desert base was quieter than usual. Men who normally laughed in the mess hall sat with serious faces, eating in silence. Radios hummed with coded chatter. The air felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Claire sat at a corner table, her tray untouched. She wasn't nervous about herself. She had trained too long, fought too hard to let nerves shake her now. But she thought about what the mission meant. If she failed, Those generals would walk free. Thousands of families would pay the price. Children, mothers, fathers, people who had no idea their lives were already dangling by a thread. She couldn't let that happen. Later that evening, Agent Brooks entered the barracks where Claire had been cleaning her rifle. "They just confirmed it," he said. "The generals will meet tomorrow night, 0200 hours. Location, a remote villa in the mountains. Heavy security. But we'll get you in position." Claire kept working, checking her scope. "How close?" "Not close," Brooks admitted. "We can set you up on a ridge line about a mile away. It'll give you the angle, but it's going to be rough terrain, cold, wind shifting all night. You'll only get one chance." Claire nodded, calm as ever. "That's all I need." Brooks studied her for a long moment. "You know, I've read your file. I've seen the things you've done. But this is something else. No one will believe it unless they see it with their own eyes." She looked up at him, her face steady. "They don't have to believe it. They just have to live because of it." When the transport helicopter lifted off the next evening, Claire sat inside with her rifle across her lap. The rotors thundered overhead, whipping sand into the night. Beside her, a small team of soldiers checked their gear, though their eyes occasionally drifted toward her. Some of them were curious, others doubtful. A few still didn't bother hiding their smirks. Not one finally leaned over, shouting above the noise. "You really think you can do this? 3 targets? One night? That's not a mission, it's suicide." Claire met his eyes. "Then you should be glad it's not your job." The soldier had no answer. They landed on rough ground hours later, the mountains looming black against the starlit sky. The air was thin, sharp, carrying the kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder. The team moved quickly, setting up a perimeter, whispering into radios. Claire broke off, moving with Brooks up a narrow path that wound to the ridge line. The climb was steep, the rocks loose, but she moved with quiet strength. Her breath evened out at the top. She laid out her rifle, adjusted her scope, and scanned the villa below. Lights glowed faintly from the windows. Guards patrolled with rifles slung across their shoulders. "There," Brooks whispered, pointing to a balcony. "That's where they'll meet. If you're going to take them, that's your chance." Claire adjusted her position. Her body pressed into the cold rock. She slowed her breathing, steadied her heartbeat, and let the world narrow into the circle of her scope. The mission had begun. For hours she waited, still as stone. The wind cut across the ridge, biting at her face, tugging at her clothes. Most people would have shifted, shivered, given in to the discomfort. Claire didn't move Dot in the stillness. Her mind wandered. She thought of her father teaching her to shoot a hunting rifle when she was just a girl. She thought of the jeers she'd endured in SEAL training, the way men had lined up bets against her. She thought of Harlow, his smirk, his laughter echoing in the Veterans Hall. Dot, no one can make that shot. And now here she was, lying on a cold ridge, about to prove them all wrong, not for herself, but for everyone depending on her. Dot then, just after 0200's movement, through her scope, Claire saw a line of black vehicles pulling up to the villa. Doors opened. Guards stepped out first, scanning the area. Then, slowly, the generals emerged. 3 men, 3 targets. They walked inside, their movements deliberate, confident. Claire tracked them, waiting, patient. She knew the kill wasn't in their arrival. It would be when they gathered together. Minutes dragged on like hours. Then the balcony doors opened. The 3 generals stepped outside, speaking in low voices, their faces clear in the pale light. Claire's finger rested lightly on the trigger. This was it, the impossible shot. Just as she steadied her aim, a sudden crack split the air. Gunfire erupted below. Guards shouted, rifles flaring. Someone had spotted movement. The villa was alive with chaos. Brooks swore under his breath. They know we're here. Through her scope, Claire saw the generals turning back toward the doors. Her window was closing. Most snipers would have panicked. Most would have taken the first shot they could and hoped for the best. But not Claire. She breathed deep, slow, calm. She let the world go quiet around. Her .1 squeezed. The first general dropped instantly. The second turned, shouting another squeeze, and he fell back against the railing. The third bolted for the door. Claire tracked him, her movements smooth, her pulse steady. Just before he disappeared, she pulled the trigger. The bullet struck true. 3 shots. 3 generals. All in less than 10 seconds. Brooks stared at her, stunned. My God. You did. But Claire was already breaking down her rifle, her voice calm. We're not done yet. They'll come for us. And she was right, because while the impossible shot had been made, the mission was far from over. The enemy knew they were here, and now they were closing in. The villa below erupted into chaos. Guards shouted in their native tongue. Radios crackled. Floodlights cut across the night sky. Black shapes swarmed the courtyard, rifles raised, searching for the ghost on the ridge who had just ended there. Leaders. Claire slid her rifle into its case with calm, deliberate movements. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing stayed steady. The impossible part was over. Now came the dangerous part. Beside her, Brooks was wide-eyed, his chest heaving. They're coming up the ridge. Fast. We've got maybe 5 minutes before. They're on us. Claire slung the rifle over her shoulder, tightening the strap. Then we don't wait here. The path down the backside of the ridge was narrow, sharp rocks cutting through the soles of her boots. Brooks stumbled more than once, but Claire caught his arm each time, steadying him without a word. Behind them, the sound of engines roared. Trucks were already circling the mountain, men shouting orders. Searchlights swept across the slopes, beams of white slicing through the darkness. They've boxed us in, Brooks said, his voice shaking. We'll never make it back to the evac point. Claire crouched low, scanning the terrain. And we don't go back? We go through. Through? Through them? She looked at him, her voice firm. It's the only way. They moved quickly, slipping through shadow and brush, keeping low as patrols spread out. Claire carried herself like she had 100 times before, in places far from home, calm under fire, sharp in every choice. When 2 guards rounded a corner, flashlights sweeping, Claire motioned for Brooks to stay back. She pressed herself into the rock wall, waiting until the light passed her face. Then, with silent precision, she moved. Her arm hooked around one guard's throat, cutting his voice. Short. Her other hand pulled the knife from her boot, striking clean and fast. The man dropped without a sound. The second guard turned, his eyes going wide. Before he could shout, Claire lunged, silencing him with ruthless efficiency. Brooks stared at her, stunned. You didn't even hesitate. Claire wiped the blade on her sleeve, sliding it back into her boot. Hesitation gets people killed. They pressed on, weaving through the enemy lines. For every group they avoided, there was another they couldn't. And when the firefights broke out, Claire led with the kind of cold focus that turned chaos into control. At one point, they were pinned down behind a stone wall, bullets chipping away at the rock around them. Brooks was trembling, clutching his pistol, firing wildly. Claire reached over, forcing his hand down. Stop wasting rounds, she said. They'll overrun us. Not if you breathe, she replied. She leaned out, sighted her rifle, and dropped 2 men before they could reload. Another rushed from the side. She pivoted, firing once, clean to the chest. When silence fell again, Brooks just stared at her. How are you not afraid? Claire's eyes were steady. I am afraid. I just don't let it control me. Hours passed like minutes, the night dragging on with no clear end. Claire led them through the maze of rock and brush until they found a dry ravine, shielded from the floodlights above. They collapsed there for a moment, Brooks gasping for air. Claire scanned the horizon. The villa was burning now, fire licking. The sky. The general's deaths had thrown everything into confusion, and though they were being hunted, the enemy was stumbling in the dark. This ridge leads east, she said, pointing. There's a canyon. If we can make it before dawn, they'll never find us. Brooks wiped sweat from his forehead, nodding. Lead the way. But the path east was an empty dot. As they reached the canyon rim, the ground shook with the sound of engines. A convoy of trucks pulled up across the ridge, headlights cutting through the night. Soldiers poured out by the dozen, rifles raised. Claire and Brooks dropped flat. We can't fight that many, Brooks whispered. Claire's eyes swept the ground. They're a cluster of boulders, a steep drop beyond. She pointed. We move when they spread. Stay low. Don't stop. The moment came quickly. As the soldiers fanned out, Claire grabbed Brooks' arm, pulling him toward the rocks. They darted. Through shadow, the dirt kicking up beneath their boots. They made it to the edge just as a flashlight beam swept over them. Shouts rang out. Bullets ripped through the air. Go! Claire shouted, shoving Brooks over the edge. He slid down the slope, crashing into the brush below. Claire followed, rolling hard against the rocks as gunfire blazed overhead. She landed. Beside him, blood trickling from her temple where the stone had cut her. Claire, Brooks started, but she was already on her feet, pulling him forward. No time, she said. We keep moving. The canyon stretched for miles, winding and twisting, a maze of stone. The sound of the convoy faded behind them, but they knew more soldiers would conduct as the first light of dawn touched the sky. Claire finally slowed, sank against the rock wall, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Brooks dropped beside her, completely spent. You saved me back there, he said quietly. She didn't answer. She just stared out at the horizon, her expression unreadable. Brooks leaned forward, searching her face. They'll have to believe you now, after what you just did, after what I saw. Claire shook her head slowly. Belief doesn't matter. Not to me. Then what does? Her eyes hardened, making sure they never doubt another woman again. But even as she said it, Claire knew the fight wasn't over. Somewhere out there, the remaining enemy forces would regroup. They would hunt again, and she would have to stand once more, not only for herself, but for every voice that had ever been silenced by laughter, doubt, or dismissal. The impossible shot had been made. Now came the harder part, surviving long enough to prove it truly mattered. The helicopter blades beat the morning sky as Claire and Brooks climbed aboard the evac transport. Her uniform was torn, streaked with dust and blood. Brooks leaned heavily on her shoulder, exhausted and shaken, but alive. The pilot gave her a quick nod as they lifted off. Heard the whole valley lit up last night. Thought no one would walk out of there. Claire didn't answer. She just stared at the shrinking canyon below, the smoke from the burning villa still curling into the dawn. 3 shots. 3 generals. Mission complete. And yet she felt no triumph, only silence. Back at the desert base, soldiers gathered to see them return. Word had spread fast rumors of what Claire had done. Impossible rumors that no one dared say out loud in full. Brooks limped out first, greeted by medics. Claire followed, her steps steady, her face unreadable. Some of the men stared, others whispered. A few turned away, unable to accept what they were seeing. Commander Harlow was there too. He had been brought to the base as an advisor, though he hadn't expected Claire to return at all. When he saw her step off the helicopter, alive and unbroken. His jaw tightened. "Well," he said, forcing a smirk, "looks like you got lucky." Brooks snapped around, his voice raw with anger. "Lucky? I was there. I saw it. 3 generals, 3 shots. In the middle of chaos, she didn't miss. She didn't hesitate. You think luck does that?" The crowd went quiet. Claire said nothing. She didn't need to dot the next days passed in a blur. Debriefings, reports, quiet conversations behind closed doors. Claire gave her account plainly, without embellishment. She described the shots, the angles, the wind, the timing. She left out the fear. She left out the blood. Some believed her. Some didn't. But the mission's success couldn't be denied. The generals were dead. Claire Donovan had pulled the trigger. When she finally returned to Willow Creek, the town looked exactly as it always had. The diner still served its strong coffee. Farmers still swapped weather talk outside the feed store. Life carried on, as if nothing had changed. But Claire had changed. She walked the streets with the quiet weight of someone who had done what others swore was impossible. She didn't brag. She didn't boast. She carried it silently, the way she had carried every burden before. That evening, she went to the Veterans Hall. The brick building looked smaller than she remembered. Inside, the same faces sat at the same tables, nursing the same drinks. Conversations hushed as she entered. Commander Harlow was there, of course. He always was. When he saw her, he raised his glass with a mocking grin. "Well, if it isn't the hero herself. Tell us, Donovan, did you really make that miracle shot? Or did the story grow bigger on the way back?" Laughter rippled through the room, not as loud as before, not as certain. But it was there Claire walked to the bar, set her hands on the counter, and looked Harlow dead in the eye. "You said no one could make that shot," she said softly. Harlow leaned back, smirking. "That's right, and I still say it." Brooks stood then. He had traveled back with her, still limping but stronger now. His voice cut through the room. "I was there. I saw it. 3 shots. 3 generals. 10 seconds. You weren't there. Commander, you didn't see what she did, but I did. And I'll tell every man in this hall until the day I die Claire Donovan made the shot no one believed possible." The room went silent. Harlow's smirk faltered. His eyes darted around, the faces staring back at him. For the first time, his voice held no certainty. "You expect me to take his word?" Claire didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached into her pocket and placed 3 spent brass casings on the bar. The room leaned in, staring. "The only proof I need," she said. No one laughed this time. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others stared at her with something new in their eyes, not doubt, not disbelief, but respect. Harlow tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, he stood and walked out, his glass still half full. Claire watched him go, then turned back to the room. "I don't care if you believe me. I don't care if you respect me. What matters is that the job was done. And when the next impossible shot comes, and it always does, someone better be ready to take it, man or woman." The silence stretched, heavy and long. Then slowly, one of the older veterans stood and raised his glass. "To Claire Donovan," he said. "To the one who didn't freeze. To the one who never missed." The hall echoed with the sound of glasses lifting. To Claire. That night, as she walked home under the glow of the streetlights, Claire felt no pride, no triumph, only a quiet sense of justice. For years, she had been underestimated, mocked, insulted, but when it mattered, when the world needed her most, she had done what no one else could. The impossible shot was hers, and no one could ever take that away. The days that followed were different in Willow Creek. People greeted Claire on the street with nods they had never given before. The same neighbors who once whispered behind her back now looked her in the eye as if they suddenly saw her for who she had always been. At the 9. Old-timers who once rolled their eyes when she ordered black coffee now pulled out chairs for her at their table. At the grocery store, kids asked her questions about the Navy, wide-eyed, like she was something out of a storybook. But Claire didn't change. She still rose before dawn. She still ran the gravel roads until her lungs burned. She still practiced. In her yard, bottles shattering in neat rows. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because discipline was her life. Respect was new, but it wasn't what she wanted. What she wanted was quiet. One evening, she walked past the Veterans Hall again. Through the windows, she saw the familiar scene. Men sitting around. Tables, glasses in hand, laughter rumbling like it always had. But when she stepped inside, the laughter dimmed. The men greeted her differently, now not with smirks, not with dismissive looks, but with nods of acknowledgement. Commander Harlow was there too, sitting alone at a corner table. His glass was empty. His back hunched more than usual. When he looked up and saw her, he didn't smirk. He didn't speak at first. He just sat in silence, his pride gone, his eyes heavy. Finally, he stood and walked to her. "I was wrong," he said quietly. The hall fell still. He looked around at the others, then back at Claire. "I spent years saying no woman could do what we did. I said it so many times I started to believe it was truth. But you," he shook his head, his voice unsteady, "you proved me a fool, and I owe you an apology." For a long moment, Claire studied him, the man who had mocked her, who had turned her into a punchline, who had said she didn't belong. Now here he was, shoulders bent, pride broken, admitting what he had never thought he would. Claire finally spoke. "I didn't do it to prove you wrong," she said. "I did it because it needed to be done. That's what service means. Doing the job, no matter what they say about you." Harlow nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's why you are better than the rest of us." He raised his hand, not for a shake, but for something more humble, a salute. The room went quiet as Claire returned it. And in that moment, the years of doubt, mockery, and dismissal fell away. Weeks passed. Life in Willow Creek returned to normal. But whispers of Claire's mission traveled further than the town. Somewhere in Washington, officials spoke her name with respect. Reports were filed, medals considered. Most of it would remain classified, hidden from public view. But those who needed to know, knew. And among those who had doubted her most, the truth was no longer in question. Claire Donovan had made the impossible shot. One morning, as the sun climbed over the horizon, Claire stood in her backyard again, her rifle steady against her shoulder. She lined up her sights on the last of the bottles. Breathing slow and calm, she pulled the trigger. Glass shattered. She lowered the rifle and stared out across the empty field, her heart steady. For the first time in a long time, she felt something. Close to peace. Not because she had proven anyone wrong. Not because people finally respected her. But because, when the moment came, she had done her duty. She had carried the weight, made the sacrifice, and never once let fear control her. That was enough. And somewhere deep inside, she knew, if the day ever came again, if another impossible shot was needed, she would be ready. Because Claire Donovan didn't just take the shot no one else could. She lived for it.